Hello friends, SentinalH here, and welcome back to another Factutorial. I think that name isn't too horrible. Go away. Weird stuff pops up on my screen sometimes. So we're here in this episode to talk about belts, all things related to basic belt mechanics. This is stuff that you can find by looking at the wiki, but it's definitely going to be more helpful seeing it in a video form. So here we've got the three types of belts: the basic transport belts, which you'll have at the start of the game, then the fast transport belts, which actually some people end up skipping altogether, but you'll probably use them.
Don't skip them, they're great.
In the mid-game. And then express transport belts, which are the end-game belts. And Waterlubber's here, as you just heard, helping us out, because he knows a lot. He's played a lot more Factorio than I have.
I play it way too...
He plays it too much. He's completely addicted. So if you look at these three belts right here, each of these stack inserters are drawing from an infinite supply of items. We've used like a creative mode mod to get like infinite items, and you can see how quickly the blue one is transporting the belts. In fact, on the yellow one, the belt is almost full on the side that it's being inserted on, but the other faster belts are getting rid of the items quickly enough to keep the belt looking only partially full. So basically, if you hover over a transport belt, you can take a look at its actual speed, which for a standard belt is 13.33, so 13 and 1/3, roughly, items per second that it can transport. This is if you're
one thing I
using
must
both
mention.
belts.
When you're setting up mining stuff, the ratio of electric mining drills to furnaces is basically 1-to-1, and one yellow belt can carry 24 or 23. I go with 24 just so there's a little bit of wiggle room, but 24 furnaces and miners on one yellow belt, 48 on a red belt, and whatever 24 times 3 is on a blue belt. So that's very good to know if you're setting up mining outposts.
Well, that would be 72, I believe. And that's related, of course, to the amount of items per second that those miners and furnaces output compared to the belt speed. So, when your belts are becoming too full or they're too slow, that's why, because you're now putting more items onto the belt per second than the belt can actually transport. That's what leads to, items backing up and not utilizing your full output potential. So the belt speed for the standard transport belt is 13 and 1/3 items per second. The fast transport belt is 26.67 items per second, which is twice as much. And the express belt is 40 items per second, which is 3 times as much. So that's how it works out. So
if you come over here, you could see the graphical representations.
Yep.
A red belt is 2 yellows, a blue belt is 3 yellows, or a red and a yellow. A common misconception is people will try to put 2 reds on a blue. This is a bad idea.
Yeah, that doesn't work. The ratio doesn't work out that way, because you might think that because the red belt is twice as fast as the yellow, oh, the blue belt must be twice as fast as the red, but that's not true. It's actually 3 times as fast as the yellow. So
I wish it was, but whatever.
So keep that in mind, and it'll make utilizing belts a lot easier. Just keep that ratio in mind. It's 1, 2, 3, basically. So over here, we're demonstrating the usage of splitters. So you'll unlock splitters once you've researched logistics, and they're extremely useful, and you'll be using them throughout the game. And as you can see here, a fully saturated, and that's the terminology that we use, a completely full yellow transport belt with a yellow splitter will split out onto 2 yellow belts that each have only one side with items. So it totally perfectly splits it, and it keeps the belt completely full. Down here we have a demonstration of if you've got 2 yellow belts going into a splitter and then 2 yellow belts coming out, it's going to balance between them, but it's also going to maintain the complete fullness of the belt. And down here you can see that if you take a red belt and you run it into a yellow splitter, what you're going to get is you're not going to get 2 full yellow belts. You're actually going to get 2 half full yellow belts, because when you're running belts into and out of splitters, you always want to use the level of splitter that matches the highest level belt that you're using right there. So this red belt needs to go into a red splitter if you want to have 2 totally full yellow belts coming out. Otherwise your splitter is bottlenecking. because the splitter's speeds are the same as the belt's speeds.
An easier way to think of this is if you look at a splitter, you could see the belts going into and out of it. Those have to be better than the belts that you're using. Otherwise, they
Yes.
can't transfer stuff into the actual splitter fast
Like if
enough.
we swapped this red one for a blue one, it wouldn't change anything.
Yeah. Although that would be incredibly expensive.
Yes, it would be very expensive
very-
and not worth it at all, but it would work exactly the same way. Up here, we have a demonstration of, again, what happens if you try and take two yellow belts and you try and use a yellow splitter to put it onto one red belt. You see, it's not full. I know it's kind of hard to tell because of how quickly it's moving, but you can see that there's large spaces between the cubes, whereas they're supposed to be overlapping each other. And yet, oh goodness, I can't even look at that without getting a headache. Down here, we've got the right way to do it. When you use a red splitter to do this, it fully saturates the red belt.
If you're wondering what these items are, these are solid fuel.
Yeah,
They make your trains go faster and are made from oil.
Solid fuel, yeah. So down here we even have a blue one, and we're trying to use a single blue splitter to split onto a red belt, two red belts. But you can see that only one half of the belt is totally full. The other is like half full, and that's again because the ratio between blue and red is not 2 to 1. It's like, what would it be, like 1.5 or something? Because
1.5 to 1.
yeah, because the ratios are all based off of the yellow belt. So down here we have that demonstration. 3 yellow belts being balanced using 3 splitters, which you have to do some weirdness down here because there aren't any 3 to 1 splitters. Splitters are all 2 to 1. But 3 yellow belts can be compressed onto 1 blue belt at full capacity. I know it's hard to see again because the thing's moving so quickly it looks mostly like a blur. But 3 yellow belts can compress down to 1 blue belt, or you can do this the other way around. So now, by the way, all the purple stuff and the strangely colored items, these are all the creative things, so don't worry about them.
Yeah, these you're not going to find in a regular game. These are only to show the tutorial, so we don't need to set like oil processing and stuff like that.
This is so that we can have infinite items. Just keep it.
However, inserters and belts are stock.
Exactly. So right here, we can see what happens when you stick an inserter on the end of a belt, which you might usually try and avoid just because it can be a little confusing for you if you're new. Because it'll always stick the items on the right hand belt. It doesn't matter which direction, the right side of the belt. It doesn't matter which direction it's going. You can see the vertical one is on the right. The horizontal one is also on the belt's right hand side. And then when you use inserters to place things onto belts, the inserters will always place the items on the far side of the belt. And this is important to keep in mind when you're trying to place different items onto the same belt, because if you mess it up, you'll end up with the different items on the same side. Then you got to go clean it up and fix it. So remember that the inserters, they always insert on the far side of the belt. Right here we have an example of something. Basically, what you can do is you can use splitters to balance out belts. With this fast inserter putting onto only one side of the belt, you know, like the one up here, we're running it through a splitter with a belt turned onto itself on the other side of the belt. And what that's doing is taking half of the items, because splitters always split 50-50. Half of the items are going onto the other side of the belt, and this is very useful if you've got, you know, items coming in that are, you know, unevenly distributed on the 2 sides of the belt.
One thing you might want to do is if you have a bunch of inserters over here, probably upgrade this to red belts and then put a red splitter here. And what this will do is, since only one side of this belt is going to be being used, its capacity is halved, and then this belt will be saturated if this one is as well. So to demonstrate that, I'll grab a bunch of these guys.
He'll quickly set this up.
Yeah, but you can see how now this one is becoming more and more saturated. Because this one, but it's not fully saturated, and we'll get to the reason why that's happening in a bit.
Okay.
And it's really quite annoying.
So right here, we're demonstrating. Is this something that you shouldn't do right here?
Yes. Also, make sure your alt view is on, just so they could see.
Oh, right, it hasn't been on. So we've got 2 inserters placing items onto both sides of a belt, and then we're using a splitter and putting half of the output on one side. And this isn't useful. What this will end up doing is this. Well, why is it bad? You explain it.
Well, this happens because this belt coming in here is technically balanced. So let me grab a bunch of stackies so we can really get this belt.
Yeah, fill the belt up.
So this belt's. Let me also turn off. There we go. So you can see that this belt's really coming full up, but the way this setup works is you can see that it's not really fully saturating
Yeah,
the exit belts
nothing is really happening there.
because it's putting them all on one side.
Yep.
So if you want to balance a belt that's got, let's say, half and half, then you want to use this better balancer here. And this will work. It will never lower your throughput as long as the belts are correctly set up and they're the right type.
Yep.
So this will work for
And
red,
you'll see
blue,
us using these
whatever.
in Factorio videos.
That doesn't need to be blue. That could be red.
No, that doesn't need to be blue. Basically, the gist of it is that you want the same amount of... Because these are 50-50, if you take half of the output and put it all on one side, it's not going to work if it's already balanced. What this is doing is balancing it, and then it's making sure that half is going on each side of the new belt. Just keep that in mind, that a splitter will always split everything that it gets evenly in half. Although there are some weird AI mechanics with it, where it tends to favor one side over another, but that's... If you want to look that up, you can check the wiki. But right here you can see that the red is perfectly balancing out onto the yellow. So what's we got over here, Waterlubber?
This is to demonstrate what inserters do when they're taking material off. They always take from the nearest one, but you can see the one at the end sometimes grabs from the back row. If they can't grab from the nearest row, they're going to grab from the back one. So this is important to know if you're going to have a long chain of inserters in a row and you want the belts to look pretty. You might end up having weird janky stuff like this where the belt is halfway drained out.
Yeah.
Ignore these coal miners. I'm trying to get rid of this coal patch because it looks ugly.
It should also be mentioned that the inserters will struggle to grab items if you use a higher tier belt and a lower tier inserter. If you replace those blue ones with yellow ones, we should be able to demonstrate it. Are you using burners? It only works if the belt isn't fully saturated. You need to unsaturate the belt.
Oh, okay, that's easy enough. Well, these are horrible inserters to begin with. Let me even further unsaturate it.
Because what ends up happening is that the items move too quickly for the slower inserters, and they miss a bunch of items, and they're just not doing much. They're not. It's not efficient. It's not effective. And this is important if you're using like burner inserters to put things to fuel into your boilers, and then you end up upgrading the belts to like red. They're gonna struggle to grab stuff.
This is only a problem if the ends of these things are full, right? You'll see these belts are going to quickly back up like this.
Yeah, once the belt's full,
once
it
they're
doesn't
backed
matter.
up, these inserters are going to have no trouble at all taking the material off of them.
But this is
so
why
if you're like having feed through, let's say you have this going to, let's say, plastic or some other production that consumes material, and this is where your burner is. Let's say this consumes all of your material, nom nom, it steals it all up. Then your burners or whatever's taking them off from the earlier part of the belt isn't going to be getting its full supply of stuff.
This is why you don't really want to run belts straight past a whole bunch of stuff having different things taking off of the belt. You should, in that case, you would use splitters. That is like headache inducingly
yeah, don't look at it.
I won't look at it. That's why you want to use splitters to do that instead. Basically split off of a belt and have at each stage rather than just running the belt straight through. So what's this stuff up here, Waterlubber? Are you ready to...
Okay, up here is weird mechanics with belts. So you might want to turn off alt view so you can see better.
Okay, what's going on?
So you'll see up here on the top one. Let me upgrade this to a yellow belt so even less of the inserters are running. So you can see only the first two are running, right?
Yeah.
So that kind of makes sense. But you look at the end here and the belt isn't saturated.
No.
It's not fully cranked out. So you can see that the inserters towards the end, even though there are visible gaps between the material, they're not fully saturating the belt. So there's two remedies for this. You could either upgrade your belts where the inserters are to a higher tier, right? You can see now it's somewhat saturating this red belt, and when it downgrades to a yellow, it fully fills it up. Or you could use the second method. So you see, when you have underground belts like this that are in line, inserters can always add items to them until the belt is fully saturated. This is just a weird quirk of the game. No one really knows why it happens, but it's quite useful if you have, let's say, a smelting setup and you want your output belts to be fully capped out with material. So you can see now the end inserters where these underground belts are running, as well as the first 4 while they're putting it on.
Gotta pause for a second.
Very, very useful tip to know. So if you come over here now,
Where?
sorry about any cuts you might have seen, you'll see that we have a mixed belt going in here. Now, for whatever reason, let me make this red just so I could show you something later. This belt has 2 different items on it, and you want to make it so it has one belt full of solid fuel and one belt full of concrete. 2 ways that you could do this. You could use the tacky method by using filter inserters to take stuff off, or you could use a different method. Filter inserters use power, and if you're using a lot of items on a very dense belt, stack inserters and stack filter inserters will use a lot of power. So there's a trick here that you could do to make your life much easier. By placing an underground belt here and another underground belt here. I did that. Wait, did I do that wrong?
I think you did.
Yes, I did. Give me a moment here. You could do this, and now you have a belt that's got only solid fuel on it, and you could do the same thing for the other one. This belt has only concrete on it. This doesn't use any power, works fine in steampunk playthroughs, and is a really useful trick if you want to have a way to separate a belt into 2 different types. One thing that I may have forgot to mention about underground belts is with the recent 15.0 patch, which you may not have installed yet, but I highly recommend you do, underground belts have extended lengths for higher tiers. So if you're building something where you have to go underneath a main bus and you're only moving a yellow belt over, using a blue underground belt, although it's quite expensive, will allow you to go under much more blocks than you would be able to otherwise.
Yeah, and that's a really great upgrade improvement, because there are a lot of situations where you want to go underneath a lot of stuff. And you just couldn't do that before with just 4 blocks of space. Like, it was just enough to go underneath an assembler. Well, with the red ones, you could go underneath. With the blue ones, I mean, you could go underneath an assembler and then have 4 or 5 extra spots. It makes it a lot easier to go fit things between the stuff you've already built.
Oh, the gaps are 4, 6, and 8, respectively.
Yep, 4,
if
6,
you want
8.
to memorize that.
Well, it's too bad. Yeah, since it's even, you can't really do perfectly going underneath something that's odd numbered.
One final trick that you could do with belts that's really quite strange is if you want to have an incredibly high throughput belt. This trick nobody knows about because it's so cool.
Nobody knows about it.
A special item in the game by placing these on belts.
Oh, I've heard. I saw this on the wiki. It sounded really weird. Cars.
You could actually get very high throughputs through these guys. So let me get some requester chests here.
Yes,
and
the car. Oh, you've blocked it. They're hitting the inserter. The cars are.
Oh.
They need to be high.
Oh, maybe you have to use longies. Well, anyway, I have no idea what I'm doing. Anyway, if you do manage to set this up, please let us know because it's
we'll
very
try
good.
It does work.
Yeah,
the cars act as boxes, and it's really weird, and we won't get into it, but it's kind of funny. So just remember that Factorio has its quirks, and as you play it more, you'll understand more of those quirks and how to utilize them.
Other strange things include things like mix belts, right? Where you have a belt that has more than 2 different types of items on it. Don't do these because although something like this may seem like it'll work, let's grab these 2 over here because they're already set up, right?
Yeah.
Let's say I wanted to have all 3 of these on a belt. This is actually quite a bad idea, so don't do this. Also, I don't even know what some of these items are. They must be from the creative mode mod.
It looks like those 2 are the same.
Yeah, let me get a different one here.
These are spitter spawners. Yeah, let's get items people will recognize.
So we have all these weird different types of interesting items, right? Why can't we do this with the belt? If you have inserters taking off this belt and one item is removed more than the other or other stuff like that, it's going to cause a lot of problems. The only way to do this is with a recirculating setup where excess material is fed back into the start by using filter inserters. You could look these up on the Factorio subreddit or forums if you want to learn more about them.
Yeah, and those locations, as well as the Factorio wiki, are full of information that can be very helpful. And on the wiki for these topics we're talking about here, there are also little video clips demonstrating things as well. So there's plenty of resources for you to use to learn Factorio, and there's that Reddit link down at the bottom, as well as the wiki for Factorio.
Put them in the description.
So I highly recommend checking those out if you're still a little bit confused. I hope we didn't go over too much stuff all in one video, but belts are important. That's a lot of cars. Belts are important because they're your primary method of moving things around your factory for a large part of the game, and even once you acquire things like logistics robots and trains, you're still going to be utilizing belts. So learning how the belts work and how they function is going to be really important, and so it's a great, foundational knowledge for your time in Factorio. So I hope you've enjoyed this video. If you have questions, or if you did enjoy it, please like and comment down below and leave us your comments about your questions and what you'd like to see in the future as far as Factorio content. We're going to be producing more of these and go over some more of the information that you might you'll need to know, that you might want to know. So thank you so much for watching. Join our Discord if you're interested. Links in the description. I'm Sentinel H, and I'm signing out.